Hello, welcome to part 5 of my presentation, The Path to Silence, Japan's Christian Century and Beyond. My name is Walt Mussel. I'm an author in the Atlanta area. When we finished part 4, it was the 1640s. We've just seen in Japan a huge martyrdom with the execution of 37,000 Christians in the Shimabara uprising. You also had two priests who had apostatized and are now helping the Japanese government hunt for hidden missionaries and Christian contraband. You also have Japanese citizens being forced to register with their local Buddhist temple. The reason for this is at their Buddhist temple, they could declare their fealty to the local religion, but they would also be required to perform the fumie. The fumie, as was discussed in the last part, was where citizens were required to step on an image of Jesus on the cross or the Virgin Mary. Those that refused were Christian and executed. Those that did it immediately were okay. Those that hesitated were subject to further interrogation. This practice, the Christians basically had to accept that this was part of their world to survive. They would go in to the temple, perform the fumie, and then go home and do some kind of penance for their sins. And the fumie got more elaborate. They started it was just an image, a picture of some kind, and then they went to wood and eventually to cast images that they would throw in front of people. The cast images that still exist today that are from that time period, you can see just how many times they were stepped on. The only people not required to step on them were apparently the Dutch who were in Dejima. Some history books will tell you that the Dutch were required. Some will say no. I reached out to the Nagasaki Museum of History and Culture. They said that they don't believe that the Dutch assigned to Dejima were required, but the Dutch who came on ships to visit definitely were not required, as they weren't allowed off the ship in the first place. So when Christians did this, the fumie, like I said, they would go home and do a penance for their sins. At the same time, they did their best to maintain the faith. They started by dividing tasks up among the believers. One person, for example, would be called the Mizukata. Mizu means water. Kata means person. So a Mizukata is a water person or a person who does baptism. You would also have a record keeper and then other tasks as well. They didn't have any priests at this time, but they were trying the best they could. They would hold secret services. They'd hold services in secret rooms. They also might meet at night in the woods, make a dirt altar, hold a service, and then destroy the altar after they were done. And doing it this way also allowed them to destroy the altars quickly if they suspected someone was coming. The worship service centered around prayers. that were memorized and passed down to descendants. They also combined their worship with Buddhist services. For example, if a Christian died, they still were required to have a Buddhist service at whatever temple they were registered at. But while the funeral service was going on, there would likely be a Christian in a secret room somewhere holding up rosary beads and constantly washing them in water while uttering repetitive prayers. They did their best to maintain images of the faith in the public but hidden. For example, they would take figurines of Mary and disguise the figurine to look like a female bodhisattva, as the picture on the right shows. They would carve crosses into the backs of statues. They would also take Buddhist deities that aren't pictured with children and then pair them with children. And the pictograph of the number 10, the kanji for the number 10 shown in the bottom left, became used in communications because of its resemblance to a cross. There were other ways of passing messages. The Japanese language has many kanji, but over the course of your 12 years in school, your first through 12th grade education, you're taught roughly, I believe, 1950, which are the most commonly used kanji. We've got 4 here, left to right: mountain, rice field, circle, and roof. The first 3 are taught to first graders. The one on the right is taught to third graders. These kanji have more than one pronunciation. For example, you look at the first one and the mountain one, and it can be pronounced Yama or San. The second one, rice field, could be pronounced Den, Da, or Ta. And if you put the first 2 kanji together, you make a common last name, Yamada. But sometimes when you start pairing kanji together, and if they know the words, if it's referring to vocabulary, then yes, most people will know what it means. But if it's like a place name, then it will stump people because of the different pronunciations. This isn't like going to England and saying Birmingham, and then being in the southern US and saying Birmingham. If these 4 kanji shown were paired together and meant to indicate a place, you could use the first line of their pronunciations, Yamaden Maru Oku. Maybe go for the second one, Sanda in Ya. Or because you might think the first 2 are Yamada, you could mix them up. Yamada in Oku. No, unless you know, no one's quite sure. But for Christians, the pairing of these 4 kanji had one supportive meaning. Santa Maria. Santa Maria, Saint Mary. Mary was a very important part of the faith in Japan. There was one not so hidden symbol. Himeji Castle shown in the bottom left is the most recognizable castle in all of Japan. Most of the castles in Japan have been rebuilt, but 7 of them are considered original construction. Himeji is used in movies and television. James Bond, You Only Live Twice, used Himeji Castle. Tom Cruise, The Last Samurai, used Himeji Castle. When the book Shogun was made into a television series, they used Himeji Castle. The castle is so recognizable, it's designed to look like a white heron in flight. But this current image is due to reconstruction that happened in the early 17th century. In the late 16th century, Himeji Castle was only 3 stories high, not the current 6 stories that it's shown in the bottom picture. And sometime during the late 16th century, a cross appeared as one of the tiles. If you see in the top left, these tiles are like talisman. They're put on the eaves, and they're put there to protect against fires, floods, tsunamis, earthquakes, whatever you want. But this cross came. And when the castle was remodeled from 3 stories to 6 in the early 17th century, the Himeji Castle, the cross, was one of the items that survived into the remodeling. Some people think it's because one of the castle lords, a former castle lord, was a Christian. It's also believed that of the 9 samurai in charge of reconstruction, that 5 of them were Christian. But no one is quite sure. And what is even more astonishing, is that in a country where every bit of Christian imagery is being wiped out, this cross in broad daylight, visible to everyone, was allowed to stay. This cross is also the inspiration for my book, The Samurai's Heart. In the 1830s, the Paris Foreign Mission Society took up the task of spreading Catholicism back to Japan and also to Korea. And in 1844, missionaries went to Okinawa to study Japanese. At this time, the only contact Europe has had with Japan has been the Dutch, still operating out of Dejima. When they started, Dejima was considered good duty. The sailors were restricted to that man-made island for the most part. And in the fall, they would get 7 ships a year and doing a lot of work. They would get off the island once a year to go visit the shogun in Edo, which is the old name for Tokyo, and bring the shogun gifts. And that trip would take at least 3 months. And during the idle time, the Japanese government kept them, supplied with prostitutes to keep them on the island. But also, Dejima was the most profitable asset the Dutch had in Asia. And so they granted the sailors there a lot of leeway. A sailor could do trade on the side and make 20 times his own salary. Over the course of the next 200 years, the number of ships were cut back, first from 7 down to 5, and then down to 2 a year, making it more difficult to earn a profit. But the Dutch maintained this port as an asset and a contact in the Far East. But in 1853, 4 U.S. ships under the command of Commodore Matthew Perry steamed into Edo Harbor. They demanded that Japan open trade with the West. The Dutch had warned Japan that the Americans were coming. They sent them letters saying, the British just set up 5 ports in China. The Americans are coming for you. The Japanese said, thank you very much. We'll handle it. And then they promptly ignored it. And so they were totally caught off guard when Perry steamed into the harbor. Perry managed to negotiate 2 ports for American trade. And then by 1858, Townsend Harris, the first consul general, negotiated the Harris Treaty, which opened several ports to American shipping. It also allowed the return of priests, but these Americans could practice but not proselytize. Other treaties, other nations soon followed, and so all these ports are being served by priests. This new relationship would prove beneficial for America soon. With the Civil War in the 1860s, the North did not have the access to raw materials it once had. And so Japan became one of the countries supplying the U.S. with raw materials. In 1865, a new church was constructed in Nagasaki. It was called Ora Church. And one day, Father Bernard Pettigen, the pastor, while standing outside his church, was approached by 3 Japanese women looking for Santa Maria. Some books will say a group, but most books will, the 3 Japanese women. This was a very brave thing for these women to do. If they were wrong, Christianity was still punishable by death, and they could have been executed. But Father Pettigen assured them that, yes, he did know Santa Maria. Within a week, a secret nighttime service was held at Ora Church. And the Catholic Church learned of what were called the Kakure, or hidden Christians, still living, still practicing in Japan. By 1873, Christians were finally allowed to openly practice, and signs prohibiting Christianity were removed. By December 1882, 3 Japanese priests were ordained, the first since the reopening of the country. And by 1892, of the estimated hidden population of 50 to 60,000 Christians, 30,000 of them had rejoined the Catholic Church. For those of you who are interested in learning more or getting some feeling about what was going on, Endo Shusaku has several books that I can recommend. Silence, of course, which was the basis for this presentation, and the story of a priest who apostatizes and two students who come to find him. The priest being Father Ferreira. The Golden Country, a play about martyrs in Japan, is a is a theater version of the interrogation of Father Ferreira, the first priest who apostatized. And then The Samurai, which is a story about the delegation that traveled from Japan to Spain and back. All three of these are wonderful books. If you're looking for something nonfiction, start with Rodriguez the Interpreter, an early Jesuit in Japan and China, by Michael Cooper of the Society of Jesuits. Michael Cooper apparently, unfortunately, passed away last year, I think, but he was, I remember, he was either in his late 80s or early 90s, but he was an expert. John Duggal, In Search of Japan's Hidden Christians, is also an excellent book. And then Stephen Turnbull's The Samurai and the Sacred. The Samurai and the Sacred is not just Christianity. It focuses on all the religious influence of Japan. And so there is one section in the book called Onward Christian Samurai. That's quite good. And if you're looking for more information on Japan in general, medieval Japan, Turnbull is the foremost authority in the Western world. And so anything by him is excellent. Thank you for watching. I will be putting out more videos talking about individuals from the time period, such as Father Louis Fra, who wrote a book called Topsy Turvy on the differences between Europeans and Japanese. Yasuke, the first non-Japanese samurai, who is believed to have been from Mozambique and was present and serving as a samurai the night Nobunaga was assassinated. There's a movie coming out in 2 to 3 years starring Chadwick Boseman. Should be great. Also Ukon Takayama, the best known Christian samurai, as in the current patron saint of Japanese immigrants. And then Gracia Hosokawa, the most famous Japanese female Christian. My presentation, it does flow differently, but I'm happy to do it. I'm happy to visit and give it. It's a free presentation. Please reach out to me at my website, www.waltmuscle.com. Please like my page, my YouTube channel, and you'll be notified of when I put up future videos. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed it.